And actually, Guy, your company is working on one that's just a few miles away from here right now. It costs something like $3 billion, I think, is the price tag. It's over in the Panyu district in Guangzhou. What makes this thing any smarter than the rest of the city?
Well, it's a quintessential China story, isn't it? It started from the ground up, and normally we don't get to do that with our smart cities. We don't have a government and partners come to us and say, here's a blank sheet of paper. If you were going to build a smart city in the digital age from the ground up, what would that look like? How would you educate the people of that city differently? How would you entertain them? How would you provide health care? How would you transport them? Would you need cars? Would you need parking structures? All of those sorts of questions we were able to answer up front, so it's a very unique situation.
Inventing a city from the ground up seems like a very daunting task. How do you even go about starting to envision this kind of thing?
Very smart people on the front end, visionary government leaders, and the right partners. Because it's such, you're right, daunting. It's a very complex task. Cisco does a lot of things and does a lot of things well, but we're not all things to all people. And when you take on something as complex as a smart city, you need lots of good, qualified local partners.
Walk me through, give me like a step-by-step. How do you actually go about bringing this thing into fruition?
So you start with literally a blank sheet of paper, and you ask the key officials and those that are most interested in your partners what they want out of the city. Do you want to have centralized education? Do you want people, how many people do you think are going to be flowing in and out? How many are going to live there? Do you want a mix of businesses? Do you want to have waterfront? What do you want out of that water feature, out of that waterfront? Do you want to have a marina? It's all those sorts of upfront questions. And then you start building it together with the right development partner. And the nice thing that we can bring to the party is that we have a lot of local Chinese partners to do a lot of different things, from IoT to sensors to traffic management and other things. But we also have 60,000 global partner companies around the world that we engage with. So we can bring the very best ideas to the table.
So as the saying goes, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Right.
What is the progress of this thing? How long does it actually take to realize?
First buildings will be occupied in early 2020. And then
That's for the city that's here in Guangzhou.
That's right. That's for, they're in Panyu. And there are 4 different development segments associated with it. This is segment 1, and then the next ones will be built out over the next 4 years.
How many other locations are you working on projects in? And are these tailor-made for each area, or can you sort of take your blueprint and bring it to other areas, or is it custom built for each location?
Yeah, it's a great question, because what ultimately you have to do is you have to take each one individually as an individual project. At the same time, for instance, in India, one of our country digital acceleration countries, and I'll explain what that is in a moment, but we're doing 100 smart cities. For those of you that know Prime Minister Modi, he is one of the most visionary leaders on planet Earth. He's also one of the more aggressive. And in terms of wanting to accelerate in the digital age and wanting to take advantage of it. And so he put out the calling for 100 smart cities. And we started with just what we called a golden mile. It's basically taking everything that we could bring to the party and our partners and putting it on 1 mile in a very busy part of a city center. And we found out what worked and what didn't, what was successful, what failed. And then we took the best of the best, optimized it, and started to replicate it. And we're on city number 17 now.
I'd love to know what failed. What doesn't work when you try to roll it out?
That is again a city-to-city issue. It's, do you want smart lighting? Well, smart lighting is good, but it's not cheap. So it has to, your lights have to be on a certain amount of time, and there has to be a certain amount of traffic in order for it to pay for itself. right? So we know that you put up smart lighting, lighting that gets darker when it gets lighter outside, gets lighter when it gets darker outside. We know that that saves about 20% off of energy consumption for your typical city. Is that going to pay for itself in a particular city or not? We have to do that analysis. Do they want to have surveillance? Do they want to have Wi-Fi at the top of those lights? It all depends. It's on an individual basis.
You mentioned surveillance, so I'd like to talk a little bit about security and privacy.
Sure.
How do you go about thinking about how a state might use these tools for surveillance, for tracking? A lot has been talked about facial recognition technology in China. Tell us how you think about this issue.
It's a difficult issue, certainly, but Cisco is a technology company, and like many of the technology companies in this room, and I'm sure that have been up on this stage, we're enablers. Technology is agnostic. Technology doesn't necessarily know borders. We can only set up a company or a country for success. For prosperity in the digital age. How it gets used is a cultural consideration, a government consideration, a citizenry consideration, but we're really focused on setting them up for success in the future.
And how do you go about ensuring that that data is going to be secure?
Well, we're in the process now. The digital age is about connecting things, right? The information age from 1990 to 2010 was about connecting people. Now it's about connecting things, and we're going to go from about 20 billion connected things currently to 500 billion connected things by 2030. So we're going through this massive transformation. With the right security, each new connection is a new opportunity. With the wrong security, each new connection is a new threat. And so there's nothing more important than security. And I mean architecture security built into the architecture itself, from the edge to the data center to the cloud, back out to the edge again. It has to be comprehensive. And yeah, we see, and Cisco is a company, about 70% of the world's traffic crosses our equipment. We stop 20 billion cyber attacks a day. We stop 6 times more cyber attacks a day than there are Google searches. And it's only getting worse. And it's getting more sophisticated. So without the right strategy up front and without cybersecurity actually built into the network, it will be a daunting task.
In some of the blog posts you've put out, you talk about solving these global world issues like wealth inequality, homelessness, hunger. But I take it Cisco isn't running a charity. What's the business opportunity here for the company?
Well, Cisco definitely has a foundation, but that's not who I work for. The business opportunity is a very straightforward one. The fact is that our CEO, Chairman and CEO Chuck Robbins, has a saying. He said, if you do good, you'll do well. And Cisco's actually taken that to heart in a very real sense. A big part of this country digital acceleration program that I run is based on that. And what it basically is saying is that, you know what, if you're helping a country prepare itself for the digital age, and you're helping the people, your focus is on inclusion, taking those that are underserved, populations that are underserved, or regions in a particular country that are underserved, and giving them access to the World Wide Web for the first time, giving them access to first quality health care, access to education in some cases for the very first time. Then sure, you'll sell equipment, no question, but you will also establish a successful environment that will hopefully flourish in the digital age and become great customers in the future. That's what this Country Digital Acceleration Program is all about.
You've used this phrase a few times,
Yes.
Country Digital Acceleration. What does that mean in plain English?
Sorry. Country Digital Acceleration is Cisco's program for select countries where we will invest in that country in doing proofs of concept, in investing in training up hundreds of thousands, well into millions of students on networking technologies and cybersecurity and digital age jobs, that sort of reskilling. And we'll invest in those countries, build out their programs for them, and help them execute. So for instance, every country has a digital agenda. Some are more sophisticated than others. We can take that.
If I can interject, who is leading the pack? Who is the most sophisticated?
Oh, there's so many, but I think of India as having an outstanding digital agenda. Germany. Unfortunately, we don't have one in the U.S., but we'll get around to it, I guess. Would
you say the U.S. is lagging then?
Yes. Nationally, yes. We're working with the states. We had to go to the state level. The governors in the U.S. are all prepared, and they have their own digital agendas now. But it certainly wasn't a priority, unfortunately, for the federal government. That may change over time. But if you look at India, they're aggressive. The UAE, someone like Sheikh Mohammed, who is one of the most citizen-centric leaders that we know, along with Modi and a few others. They have very purposeful agendas that are very citizen-focused, quality of life focused, and those are very successful.
So rewiring a city is no small feat.
Right.
What's the biggest obstacle that must be overcome to do this?
You know, it's almost never technology. They give us credit for the technology, they spot us the technology. It's around the regulations, policy in some cases, which is why we work so closely with the government, because sometimes we have to overcome obstacles that are unintentionally in the way.
What advice would you have for municipalities or governments that are interested in exploring this new frontier?
It takes a process, and it takes a proven process. So obviously, one of the pieces of advice is if they're really serious, they can always reach out to us and we can help them. It doesn't cost anything, right? This is to make sure that they do it right. It's not about it's not about taking on a consultative role. We want to make sure that that they think through the actual costs of doing it and the benefits, because there is an ROI component that for most cities is very important. Cities, if you know them, they're all broke, even when they aren't. They still are, ostensibly. And so we need to work on those things that are really going to move the needle for the city and have an impact.
We've got just about half a minute left, so I'd love to just leave off and ask, what's the most exciting technology that you're seeing that's going to be incorporated in one of these smart cities?
What a great question. You know, one of the ones that I'm most excited about, and it's just because I spend a lot of time on trains, is uninterrupted Wi-Fi on trains, where you...
I think we can all agree that would be excellent to have, right?
That the technology is there. We just have to have some train operators with the will to do it. But it's being able to be productive throughout the entire train ride and stay connected.
Well, that's all we've got time for. I'll be thinking about having that uninterrupted Wi-Fi on my train to Hong Kong later this week. But thank you so much for joining us, Guy.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.